Hi again, everyone. I'm Adam Syed, violinist and teacher in the Seattle, Washington area. This tutorial video is going to be about how to shape a phrase. And I'm just going to do it with simply ya-da-da-da-da, A, B, C sharp, D, E. A lot of people focus their violin practicing and their development on developing as virtuosic a technique as early as they can in their lives. So we're talking about fast notes, ricochet, spiccato, fast left-hand passages where we're whizzing up and down the fingerboard. But one of the problems that I had when I started college, and my professor would always say to me, there are some very good things in there, but what I don't get enough of a sense of is where the phrase is going. And that also reminds me of when I was a very little kid and my father, who has no musical experience or training of any kind, he would say to me, "Make it sing, Adam, make it sing." The problem is, however, how do we do that? If we've got a few simple notes, one after another, and we want to make the music sound like it takes us somewhere, how do we do that? So let's deal with this with just the following notes. Okay? Now, my goal here is to have you feel like I'm starting with an A and it's like a staircase and it's arriving at the E. Ya da 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 da. Okay? I'm trying to avoid ba da 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 da. That's boring, right? It needs to take us somewhere. Now, my advice is that whenever you learn a new piece of music, let's just take this simple phrase, the first thing to do is shape the phrase with the bow. That means you need to use the combination of length, speed, and pressure. And what I mean by shaping it with the bow is, I mean practicing it at first with no vibrato. Now, when I play this again, watch me carefully. Watch the speed in particular of the bow. Okay, I'll do it again. Do you see what I did there? I started with a slower bow speed, and as the phrase went on, I increased the speed. So if I did that with an open, let's just say I do that with just an open string to show what I did bow-wise. Okay? So once again, so what I'm basically doing is I'm using about that much bow on the first note, then a little bit more on the second, and so on and so forth. Okay? I am not making it 25%, 25, 25, 25. They're not all the same length. If I were to do that, do you hear how there's less direction in it? So, that's the first thing, is that I want to decide exactly what my speed of each note is going to be and how much length there's going to be. Also, now I'm going on an up bow, so naturally the bow is going to get heavier anyway as it goes to the frog. But in addition to that, I'm also increasing the pressure somewhat. With my power finger, my index finger, I'm increasing the pressure somewhat as I get toward the frog. Not too much, obviously, because I don't want it to choke down here, right? But right here, right around there, I'm really feeling myself starting to dig in, okay? Of course, then when we get really close to the frog, then I want to release a little bit of pressure because there's just so much. At that point, you can pretty much just rely on gravity, right? But the main thing is the length of each note and then the increasing speed. So now I have shaped the phrase with the bow. One of my teachers in college used to say that this is the cake. This is the icing, okay? We all love the icing, but if I were to hand you a platter of only icing, you take a few bites and then be like, yeah, that's okay. I've had enough, right? So the bow is the cake. Or perhaps we could say, if we want to use another analogy, the building, right? This is the basement, okay? These are the upper floors. So now let's move over to the vibrato. In order to create that sense of each note being a little bit more, I don't want to say important, but intense, that it's a step closer to the arrival point than the previous note, I will make the vibrato a little bit more intense, perhaps a little bit faster as I increase as I get further along in the phrase. Now, in this case, as we all know, the pinky is the weakest vibrato finger, and it's the weakest finger for just about anything, including vibrato, just because it's so short and because the pad of the finger is so small compared to the other pads of the other fingers. But nonetheless, that pinky, that has to be the most important note. It's the arrival note. Now, of course, and it depends on maybe what happens after this in the music, in this hypothetical piece of music that I'm composing right now, I could always shift up and go to the second finger, where it will be a lot easier to have a more intense vibrato. But the point is, to sum up, shape the phrase with the bow using length, speed, pressure. Then add the vibrato and think about the intensity, in other words, the speed and the oscillation degree with each note, exactly how intense you want each note to be, right? And in this case, because it's simply a kind of a simple staircase, each note should be just a little bit more intense than the previous one, culminating in the top note. So that is a very simple example of how to shape a phrase. And this is how you should, anytime you have a piece of music that has a lyrical section that is not technically difficult, it might be a section for which hitting the notes is a piece of cake on first reading, right? And a lot of people, when they're learning their pieces, they will ignore these sections and focus only on the really technically fast or difficult sections, the stuff with chords and fast arpeggios and ricochet and sautier and all of the rest of it. And some of you probably might be familiar with the book called The Art of Practicing the Violin by Robert Goerle. And he had his I believe it was 10 rules in the first chapter. And one of the things he said was, don't neglect the easier sections because they can tend to take revenge on you. Sometimes, for example, when you're caught up with practicing just the hard sections and you don't really spend much time on the technically easy, but nonetheless lyrical sections, what can often happen is you might get to a jury or an audition or a performance, and you get to that easy section and you're like, wait, do I shift to third position now or in another bar from now? And then the brain sort of freezes up a little bit, and an otherwise very well prepared performance could fall apart. But that's a separate issue. That's about just don't neglect the easy stuff. When you are practicing these passages, this is what you need to do. Always shape the phrase with the bow first. Know exactly how much speed, length, and pressure you're going to use on every note, every slur, every articulation. Do it first, entirely without vibrato, then add this. To sum up once again, cake, icing. Thanks. See you next time.